Welcome, everybody, to the Depths of Motherhood podcast. This is a special season dedicated to the tribe of the mother. But also, I know any mothers listening will find this extremely valuable. I've created each episode to offer simple, digestible, and supportive information, which I hope will educate and inspire anyone who listens. So, this is by popular demand. Please help us to educate and support the tribe holding the mother. Look forward to passionate and highly knowledgeable guests dedicated to reclaiming the essence of birth and embracing conscious parenting. Throughout our time together, our guests will serve as the guiding voices, illuminating the path towards a deeper understanding of preconception, pregnancy, birth, and postpartum. This is with the mother and the baby being the center of the exploration. In the show notes, you'll discover the link to Nourished Mother package, which will offer many different resources to complement each episode. This is free for all members in the Women's Circle, or £33 for everybody who just wants to purchase the package. A heartfelt thank you to our incredible guests and immense gratitude to my partner for supporting me on this creation. And finally, last but not least, special thank you to Araya, my daughter, for being the endless well of inspiration. Welcome, everybody. Today we are joined by Reverend Olivia Bareham, a death midwife, interfaith minister, and founder of Sacred Crossings. Sacred Crossings is a unique organization dedicated to transforming how we approach death and dying. Olivia's work is rooted in a deep reverence for the natural cycle of life and death, drawing from her experience with diverse spiritual practices and her own personal loss. With Sacred Crossings, she has woven together death education, midwifery support, and conscious after-death care. Olivia shares how culture has distanced itself from the natural process of dying, often leaving us feeling disconnected, fearful, and disempowered. Sacred Crossings seeks to heal the disconnection by creating opportunities for individuals and families to be involved in death care. And they offer classes and workshops in conscious dying, death doula training, and home funeral guidance. Olivia emphasizes the importance of approaching death with the same intentionality and respect we often reserve for birth. And as you'll know if you're listening to this podcast, we have been going so deep in how we can contribute to the reclamation of undisturbed physiological birth. Throughout this conversation, Olivia opens up about her own personal experiences and how she came to do the work she does after the death of her mother, and how the moments with her mother as she transitioned really helped to deepen her into her own understanding around death, and how it is such an honor to arrive at the bedside of these people that we love and care for them and witness them as they transition on their final journey in this human form. Olivia is showing up. She is sharing her wisdom, using her voice, taking care of families around her to encourage them to show up for one another, to explore a different perspective on how we can honor these moments to really reclaim this rite of passage. And we go into the similarities between birth and death as these transformative thresholds. Just as in birth, when the physiological, emotional, spiritual journey is disrupted by unnecessary interventions, the same can happen at our time of death. And the question is, how does that disrupt our transition if we are not fully able to feel and receive the experience that is meant for us? And this is what a rite of passage is, from the known to the unknown. The difference is with death, we don't get to have the conversation with the person afterwards. But as with any rite of passage, this ripples out to the whole of the family, the community, and beyond. So how we show up in the moments, how we can hold that space, how we can witness this transition with so much love and trust so they can feel that they are held as they cross over. That to me is such a powerful gift that I definitely want to contribute to. And this conversation journeys on to grief for the people who remain on earth, and how these moments following the death of their loved ones, as they care for the body, as they come together to hold this space, she talks a lot about these 3 days following the death and how when we create ceremony and ritual around this, it really supports us in the integration and grieving process. So, what do we do if we don't have the family? Well, then we have to do this for ourselves. We have to tune in to something much greater. I feel this conversation is so important, and I'm so glad you're here because for many of us, death is not something that is openly spoken about. Grief is not something that our collective holds very well. Oftentimes, our loved ones are handed over to people we don't know. The funeral service takes over, and with it, they take a large chunk of our money, often making us feel bad if we don't have a service that they suggest. This conversation is getting you to the roots of what is really happening in this physiological transition and learning how you can prepare, how you can know your rights, learn how you can create ceremony out of this. And I truly believe that when we remember how to hold death and grief, we are going to take a huge leap in our evolution. I can feel it as we are taking back birth, as we are understanding physiological birth. And I can feel it as I have conversations with my sisters, with my family around death, around grief. The language that is used, the way that I'm seeing people show up has surprised me in such a beautiful way. And I think when we become conscious of these transitions, of these rites of passage, it continues to ripple out. The world begins to wake up more and more and remember. And in this conversation, we do touch on unexpected deaths. What if we haven't got the time? What if our loved ones die and it's very unexpected? What if we cannot have their body for that 3 days? When my brother took his life in March 2023, no one was there with him. And this is one of the most painful parts for me, especially knowing how powerful it is and important it is to have that loving awareness surrounding you as you transition. When I visited his home where his family still lives, I went to the door where he took his life and I sat before him. I imagined he was there and I did nothing to try to intervene with my mind. I just brought myself to that moment in time. I let my eyes soften and I held the loving awareness in that space. I softened my own body, I opened my heart, and I just sent him so much love. And I said, it's okay. And I held him in that loving awareness as he transitioned. And as part of that ceremony, I had frankincense and I sprayed the frankincense around the door as a symbol and an offering for his transition. And I just rested there and breathed. And in that moment, there was stillness. No thoughts were penetrating through my mind. I was just there with complete trust and complete surrender. And I share this story because I know for many of us, we've experienced a loss that is unpredictable. And even when someone comes to the end of their life after many years, maybe our memory of that is of medical interventions, unnecessary disturbance. So I feel that we can go back and witness them in their moments and hold them as they transition. I want to say a heartfelt thank you to Olivia for joining me in this space and having this conversation and for all the incredible work that she is doing. And thanks to you for being here, listening, taking this journey with me, remembering that wisdom that is within us all of how to honor and take care of these powerful and sacred rites of passage. Before we go in, I'd just like to remind you that we have our first Mother's Circle on the 18th of November. This is donation based, and we will be coming together each month to share our challenges, our wins, to be witnessed in this space, and to pray and meditate together. You can find the link in the show notes for that. Okay, let's take a deep breath. and feel our body in this moment in time. If you're noticing any unnecessary tension or imbalances in your physical body, I welcome you to take some gentle movements, guide your breath into all these spaces that are calling for your loving awareness. And throughout this conversation, come back to your body again and again, and you can pause at any time and really connect to the words and what arises within you. Thank you so much for being here. If you feel that this conversation, upon listening, would serve somebody that you know, please send this on. Thank you. Olivia, thank you so much for being here. I am really looking forward to getting to know you more and listening to your wisdom. So thank you.
You're so welcome. It's great to be here.
And I'd love to start so we can get to know you a little bit more. How did you get into doing the work that you do to be a death midwife, as is your label and your social media? How did you get to do this work?
Well, my background, way before I became enmeshed in the death world, was hands-on healing. So I've always been in the healing realm on some form or other. I've been on my own deep personal spiritual journey for, close on 50 years now. So it was only when my mum got sick and she was dying and I went back home to England to take care of her, that I actually re-entered the healing world, being bedside with her and remembering that space when you're in the quiet with somebody who's very ill and they have let go of all of their desires and uh, their doings, and they've settled into their being. And I always noticed, even in the past, when I was with somebody on a table, how it would affect me, and I would then also drop back into that being state. So that was I love this place. Um, and it's all intertwined with the sorrow and the letting go, and all of that is a peaceful, gentle experience, and quintessentially the opposite to the to-do list and the rushing around and the being and the having and the doing. So, yeah, mum's dying put me back inside myself, I think. And it was a pleasure to hold her as she was in her final days, to have that long time to say goodbye. And then when she actually took her last breath and her body died, the hospice nurse came over and invited me to take care of her body. And it just felt like the most natural, normal, obvious next thing to do. Yes, yes, please show me. How do we do this? So together there in the living room, which had turned into her deathbed, the hospice bed was in the living room. The two of us just gently took off her nightie, got some soapy water, washed her body, and there was something about the quiet and the timelessness of this very gentle space with just me and the nurse and my mom. It felt right, it just felt right. And so we dressed her, we washed her, we laid her out in her burial trousseau, which she had stashed away in the bottom drawer of her dresser. It had been there for 80 years. Her grandmother had given it to her mum when she was born, which, which actually was another tradition that I found out was common in our family, that the burial trousseau and the christening robe were made out of the same piece of white, beautiful linen fabric. And I thought that was interesting too, that this acknowledgement of death when a newborn baby was born thought, how wise is that to acknowledge that this tiny infant is going to have a life and hopefully grow to fit a 6-foot shroud. Um, I loved that. I loved putting her in it, knowing that it hadn't seen the light of day for 82 years. There was something very special about every little aspect of doing this sacred work of saying goodbye to Mum. And so we laid her out, and she looked gorgeous, very peaceful. And we invited the neighbors over and other relatives and friends. And soon the living room was bustling with people and kids and dogs. And I just sat there on a chair close to the bed and just breathed it in. Like, Mom is dead. Mother is dead. And I had all the time I needed to get used to that idea. Nothing was hurried. Nothing was taken away. Nothing was unusual. There were no strangers in the house. And that felt right too. And that actually was the beginning of my journey. And I say now that that is when the umbilical cord between me and Mum was cut once again. And in saying goodbye in this very gentle, final way, I released her as mother. And even though I'm looking back and putting it together now, I birthed myself. And I realized we have fundamentally lost something in our culture by giving away our dead, especially our dead mother or father, significant other, to strangers to prepare and care for in these final days. And the days between the last breath and burial or cremation are the final days. And I think they're very significant on many different levels, which I notice for myself and the families I care for. There is deep healing to be had in these days. There's an opportunity for profound noticing, which has the capacity to affect and change you. The way you face your own mortality, the way you experience life and end of this life, um, the texture of your own love and what is sorrow. It's huge. And I think we need at least 3 days, if not a week, uh, to fully integrate these elements into our being. And I know that if we do give ourselves this extra time, our own dying and our own death and our own fear or lack of fear of the end of this life would be very, very different. And that's why I do what I do now for hundreds of families, is I just help keep that window of opportunity open for a few more days so that people can have their loved one in their home doing their own intuitive rituals and caretaking so that they can put themselves like back together and in a new way, and they can begin to build this relationship with their deceased loved one in a new way. And it takes a minute. And you, and when you have the body there present, it makes it easier, softer, kinder, gentler, more humane, more loving. Why do we have to imagine somebody in a plastic bag on a metal shelf in a refrigerator in a strange building somewhere when we could simply do it ourselves?
Wow. Thank you so much for taking us on that journey. Wow. It brought many things for me that I'll try to put into words. Oh, the bed butt here. I don't want to be on this camera. Let me put a. Hey, Mom, do you want to stay with Mommy or do you want to go with Daddy? It's up to you. You want to stay? This Russian and this protected time really stands out. Like just like a midwife would be there during birth to hold the space, to not intervene, but to protect it so that there is that time. It really it's like the crossover to death of what you're doing. So midwife really resonates for holding that space. And I feel like there is this rush almost to get it over with. My brother was the last person to die in our family, and he was very young, and it was unexpected. Um, and it was almost as though there was such a rush to figure out all of the funeral arrangements and everything that there wasn't a time to integrate it, to process it. And so I'm curious too how you can see this affects the grieving journey, this processing and integrating of this experience with the rite of passage of loved ones coming from their physical body into to transitioning out of their body. Like how does that affect when we're rushed, when we are told almost what to do? And in many ways I've heard that from our own experience and from others, almost like if you don't pay certain prices, it is showing of how much you love and care for them, and really forgetting that time of being with them afterwards to see them and hold them. And also what comes to mind, I asked you a question, but now I'm rolling with it, is, like this rite of passage, what I've read through so many cultures, it's the community coming together and holding the family, holding the community comes together. Ma, if you want to stay upstairs, we can. Maybe. Let me have a. Hold on 1 second. You're tired. One. Do you want to stay with me? Yeah. Stay with me. You can stay. Oh, no, it's your photos. We stay with you. It's okay. Here we go. The yeah, this rite of passage of seeing family members come in to feed, to nourish, to hold that space together, and really the thought about money and finances is like secondary. There is that time. So how do you feel that when this is taken away, when it's all rushed, when there's money involved, finances, it all goes into the logical brain? How does that affect the grieving journey?
Well, it definitely postpones it because you to put those feelings somewhere else while you get on with the nuts and bolts of the business end of it. Um, and sadly, once they're put away, once those initial feelings and that intuitive knowing that you want to lean into this and wear it a little bit and see how that fits, if that's tucked away, it's much more difficult later on to bring it back up into that same volume and intensity, especially when the body's no longer there to look at. It becomes sort of it's vague now. And so the feelings that would have been available for us to intensely feel are now tucked away somewhere. And that, I think, if it's not really addressed, becomes this a ball of grief. People don't even know that they're still grieving, that they never got to see grandma, because whatever their issue is, there's always some kind of trauma involved in the death of a loved one that wasn't properly processed or addressed. And I think that's the root of dis-ease. And 20 years later, they're finally laying on somebody's healing table, and you can feel with your hands that the energy is blocked, and emotionally it got wedged back there when they were 14 and dad died of a heart attack, which was never processed. So I think it has a lot to do with it. Even just the postponing piece, you never get it all back. And I think having when somebody dies, everybody the shock, even if you expected the death because uh, they were old and they were sick and they were at home dying, still, when they stop breathing, it's a shock. You're never going to hear their voice again. They're never going to touch you again. So much has changed, and giving ourselves more space and allowing the, these little tendrils of maybe unexpected quiverings of feelings that we didn't notice while we were so busy taking care of them and making sure they were comfortable and getting their medication, and everybody's stressed out, nobody's getting any sleep, and now they're dead. There's space. Everybody gets to exhale. Now you get to feel. And when the body is whisked away within hours and wrapped in plastic and put on a fridge somewhere, that just all shuts down and
Mm.
you go into a different operating mode. And where is their grief after that? Most people feel a measure of confused, uh, disempowered. That are the feelings that I sense around people who, when anger comes up, especially when the police are involved and the
Mm.
yellow tape, caution tape comes up, and they're not even allowed to go and kneel next to their husband of 40 years who just had a heart attack. I mean, and you see it all the time. Or the boy who's found in the garage hanging, and his dad cuts him down, and mom wants to hold that son to her breast. She needs that for her mental and physical health. And a strange policeman is holding her back and telling her she can't. It's like, oh my gosh,
No,
that's trauma is irreparable.
this is like our society as well, isn't it? Of we're brought into this world, um, encouraged not to feel, encouraged to move through things to get to an end goal, and to take away any signs of discomfort or anything that is away from the grain, of what we're supposed to feel, this one linear emotion of just showing up and being pleasant, a nice smile, and being, kind of getting on with everyone. But when these moments come, these moments in time that really rip us open, so we're so raw and we forget these labels and ideas that we've put on ourselves to really get into that place to see that everything that was meant to be seen, like even if it is the most painful scene of all time, that then is the moment to be witnessed, especially, I mean, not especially, but if there is, when it, for me, because I've been really going into this, but when um, somebody dies, I feel so much that I'm not gonna look away. Like, I want to see them. I want to be with them, even if it makes me wanna run away, it makes me feel so uncomfortable, and I feel like my heart is going to, like, explode and that I'm not gonna take it. It's really reminding myself, like, I can be here. Like, I have the courage and I have the love and the compassion to be with all of this, and to be with all of that is part of the journey. And I feel that for many people holding this, or holding the person who is really deep in grief, it can be almost like a push to get them to the end of grief, which they don't realize it's always around. It's always holding us when these moments happen. But in our world, it's like, how can we get them back to the way they were? And it's funny because it's just like when a mother gives birth, it's like, let's get them back to how they looked before they gave birth, how they was, like back to business. And it's so interesting, the links between the postpartum and medium postpartum and like these grieving stages when somebody dies. And also like the expectations of certain kinds of death or certain people, like if it is a woman who has, or a family who has had a pregnancy loss, and it was early on, or maybe there was a stillbirth, um, people making judgments on how deep the grief should be and how deep the pain should be. and not realizing that's not theirs to decide. So I'm just putting my camera back on, changed cameras. Yeah, so off of what you just said just then, I'm curious if there is a way that you can see that these moments can be reclaimed, because it must be quite a common story that you hold space for, or you listen to stories and where there just wasn't these moments, these ceremonies of this transition. Have you found a way or seen ways in which people are reclaiming their moments to fully integrate?
Yeah, that's why our funeral home offers what we call reclaiming the lost art and healing ritual of a home funeral. And that is basically allowing the family to keep the body at home for as long as they need. And in California, there's no legal limit to how long you can keep that body at home. And in all the cases that we do, once the body is washed and bathed and anointed with oils and either shrouded or dressed and then preserved with dry ice, it just remains in the home for as long as that family needs. And and almost everybody after 3 days is ready. It's like it takes 3 days to completely exhale, for the brain to acknowledge that this person's not going to breathe again, for them to have had hours and hours sitting next to the body. And most people look at it with, like you say, I'm curious about death. They want to get close. They want to touch it. That we're hungry to understand this mystery that's going to happen to us too. We might not get to understand it, but getting as close as possible helps us become more familiar with the unknown. Like the unknown is not terrifying anymore. It's kind of interesting and safe. Uh, and when you have a body laying in the back bedroom, and whenever you want, you get to open the door, go and sit close, have a conversation, go out, have breakfast, make a cup of tea, come back in. 3 days later, the there's something happens, and you're, I'm ready now. And it's not unlike when you look at a newborn when they first come in. They're barely here. They're still in that womb. They're still in that liminal space. And after, they begin to open their eyes on the third day a little more. Mom's milk, it takes 3 days to come down. What is this 3 days? Christ was in a tomb for 3 days. What was happening in there? Um, a lot of ancient texts talk about it takes, they're reading special texts for 3 days. Uh, the Buddhists don't touch their dead for 3 days because they understand the luminous light body takes that long to fully separate. There's so much we don't know, but why don't we just give ourselves this three more days, and everything begins to, it's like unfold the way I want to say should, but in a much more natural, organic way. You can't force the mother's milk down before 3 days. You can't force the baby to wake up quicker. That's how long it takes. And that's what I'm endeavoring to do by creating the space for a home funeral or a home vigil.
It's
It,
really beautiful.
yeah, giving it time. Mm.
Because one of the other things I see is that it's only when someone dies do we question, okay, what are our rights here? What are the next steps? Like all because it's so blurred. It's not something people seem to talk about until somebody's died. And then all of a sudden we have all these big decisions to make and we're being pulled to our brain instead of being in our body and experiencing through our senses. And um it's something for me since my grandma, then my brother died. Like I've spent so much time just knowing, like, what would my rights be in this country that I'm in? Like, what is their practice? What is their culture? Just so that I know, because things can come as a surprise and it's not something, and I think the avoidance of it is just the avoidance of death as well. Like, I think that is also a link. Our society, for many of us, it's really not something that we look in the eye, we move away from. And even when with people holding the person who is grieving, it's interesting to see who walks away and leaves that person there. My friend's father just died, and that's her mother and father who have passed away now. And she said so many friends just, said, "I'll give you some time, like, I know you probably don't want to be, interrupted," but they didn't ask her what she needed, they just presumed. And so she's telling me, "I feel really lonely where I am right now because it's as though nobody wants to hold space for this, like, it's too much for them." Um, and I really feel this strong need to bring back this ceremony like you're doing with this time when people are dying, when they die. My grandma had beautiful moments in her last days where the whole family was around her bed and she was hanging on so tightly to something. She was really hanging on. She was struggling. And I was in Costa Rica and I said to my mom, what if each one of you like go in one by one and share with her something and just share something that comes through. So everyone did that. And then I did it as well on the phone. And within that 24 hours, she died. And they all were around her bedside. And I just thought, like, how beautiful and also how rare as well for that to happen. Um, because to have your family around people that love you as you transition over this bridge is just wow, it just makes my heart open so much. So it's like, as you're saying, the work that you're doing, it's just absolutely beautiful and what a massive role you're playing to, I would say, like awaken humanity again, bring them back into their heart to reclaim this rite of passage. It's incredible.
Thank you. You mentioned something earlier too about the grief. What I notice is that people are afraid to feel the depth of what they really feel.
Mm.
Um, and that is something I would like to address in our culture and to encourage people to feel what they're feeling, no matter what it is. Rage, despair, jealousy, fear, anger, because that's why we're human. And if we were to practice giving ourselves permission to go right down to the depth of whatever feeling that is, without it necessarily involving anybody else, it's a very personal thing. When we can get familiar with allowing ourselves to feel, because it's the discomfort and it's very unpleasant to feel horror or terror or rage like that. But okay, so it's unpleasant. So, so what? And that's extraordinary for people. They want always to move towards comfort. Like even hospice care, it's all about making the dying person comfortable. And I go in there sometimes and I think, why are we trying to make them so comfortable when dying is uncomfortable? And it's got to be it's got to be filled with a lot of messy feelings. They're saying goodbye to everything they've ever known. That's got to be not only sad, but terrifying. They might have a lot of guilt and shame about the life that wasn't very well lived. And that's going to be very uncomfortable. And what if we gave permission for that? And we taught one another to bear witness to that, because while we have the courage to let somebody else feel all of that messiness, we're actually acknowledging that we have that too. And then when it's our turn to feel the yuckiness, someone else is going to be standing there quietly beside us, not going, oh, it's okay. Don't worry. It'll be fine. That's the last thing you want to hear when you're trying to feel something. And I noticed that myself when recently something happened to me where I was feeling feelings that were the most unbearably uncomfortable. I was so blessed to be witnessed by my girlfriends who didn't try to make it better, but had the wisdom and the courage to just stand there with me, I could actually feel how uncomfortable that was for them, because it wasn't nice to see somebody you love in so much torturous pain, and yet not knowing that reaching over in any form and trying to make it better was not their place, was not even possible, and was actually detrimental to my healing journey, which insisted that I go all the way in. And I could not have gone all the way in were I not witnessed and allowed and given permission by wise women, interestingly, who are in my corner. And I feel like they were my doulas. They were my doulas, my trauma doulas. And we have birth doulas, we have death doulas, and we have midwives. And I think the midwife holds the biggest space for all of these other participants in that journey. And they include the nurses and the doctors and the hospitals and the hospices and the funeral directors and the birthing centers. And that's the umbrella of the midwife, where we're holding space, sacred space, for this transition to occur. And whether it's from becoming a mother, dying, going through trauma, going through grief, all of these transitions from one state to another, which are unbearably uncomfortable, which including birth and death and shock and trauma. What if we could train one another? I don't know that we need another set of professionals to do this, but if we were taught in high school how to bear witness and how to feel the depth of our feelings and not be afraid of feelings, I just wonder if we would be, if
Mm, that
humanity would be a,
skill.
it's a
That
skill.
skill. Yeah. It reminds me of, I do in-person women's circles and online. And really I can tell more in the in-person circles. You know, when we're there and someone's telling their story, it is a skill that we're cultivating not to touch them, not to give any signs that we're saying, oh, that it's approved what they're saying or resonating, just letting them speak and be seen. And also noticing within ourselves if we are triggered, if we close down, if we have a preference to what they're saying. And it really is like we're in these circles for 2 hours. It's the deepest practice to keep coming back, to be with ourselves, but to be with that person, to have that connection to hold space for. So it's like we have 2 points of awareness is one, making sure we're not closing down in our body so we can be fully present. And two, like being the observer without interfering. And it is such, wow, it is such a skill. And I really just like, I'm so honored to sit with these women every 2 weeks to do this practice because it's also tiring as well. It's tiring in some ways as we're learning this skill, not to interfere, not to make it better, not to make the space feel a certain way, but to literally be with it as it is. And that is the reality. And when you mentioned about making people comfortable uh, before they die, it's so interesting how them moments, that experience is almost taken away from them, just like it has been through birth, to give them the medications, to have people intervene, to have these interventions that are usually roll in and lead to something else. And then for so many, they're on the other side doing regression work to see everything that was there because they came out of their body, parts of themselves left. They wasn't able to fully experience it. And this is like, I have my daughter now, and our main priority over anything that we're trying to like help her to experience or see or guide her with is how can we be with the big emotions and see that we will be with her, we'll come and sit with her and witness her through them, but we're not going to try and fix it, but we will just, it's so funny because words are interesting because in the witnessing and living awareness, there's a softening that happens, like a dissolving of all the things that everyone's actually afraid of anyway that they try and take away. So it's so interesting how just placing that loving awareness, not needing to fix it, actually softens the experience. Um, I'm wondering if you have anything that you would say are some top tips for somebody who is supporting, holding space for a loved one who's grieving right now, who is going through these big moments in time.
Well, as you were talking, I was remembering my own birth experience with
Mm.
my daughter. It was a home birth with a midwife, and when it got to be really intense, she just said to me, "It's just your baby coming out." And she said it like she was just chatting. And you know what? When she said that, it brought me back, and she said, "Just let it happen. Your body knows what to do." It like so matter of fact that it kind of shook me and brought me back in. There was no desire on any part to do anything, no drama, no fixing, no nothing. And I remembered that. So when I'm with somebody on their deathbed, you know, I just say it's just your body dying. It knows just what to do. And giving them permission to just be in the process of their body is dying, which helps them to start to disconnect a little bit so they know that they're not dying. Their awareness, they're watching, they're witnessing this phenomena as their body dies. And you can see that that when they start to relax a little bit in, oh, yeah, that's all that's happening here. My body's dying. The intensity, which is this, when you're, with the ring of fire and the transition, you start to clench, and that makes the pain worse, right? If somebody's helping you to go like that, to receive and to allow. So my role at the deathbed is helping them notice that they're going like that, and then which the breath helps, just like it does with birth, and then they can receive what's happening. Um, but sadly, if they're on a morphine drip, this is not so possible. I like to think on some level that they can hear me and perhaps try to do it. But just as when you're saying these mothers who don't have natural births end up in regression going back, you just wonder what happens on the other side of the veil when they don't have a full embodied experience of dying. How does that affect over there? We don't know. Maybe it does. So let's hedge our bets and try to do as much as possible this end so that that's not the case.
That's, like,
And
completely fascinating to say that, by the way, because it makes me think of when the baby is in the womb, they literally don't know where they're going. They're just in this cozy space, like, I'm guessing, in this cozy space, like, very dark, just hearing the beat of the drum of the heartbeat and the mother's voice, and then suddenly, there is this push to come out, and it's like, they come out onto the other side to the unknown, and it's like, at one point they didn't know that that existed, the other side. And so, like, just even though for me, I don't have any specific beliefs about what happens after death, but I'm very open because I feel like not having a belief is also a belief. Like having a strong no about something is also a belief. So I try to stay as open and be I mean, this whole thing that we're talking about of being present with all our senses to experience everything that is there is like, is this practice of life in general with everything that comes. It's like being with our bodies so much, learning, listening to her, receiving her, and surrendering to this these unravelings of what happens through life and then into death. And I found for myself that understanding physiologically what happens during birth or postpartum, anything. I always find it much easier to then soften into it because it's more of like the flow of what's happening. So I wonder if is that the same with death when you understand like you've come to understand the physiological journey of it.
yeah, knowledge is power. Knowledge allows you to surrender more deeply, I think. And this is why in certain cultures, monks spend their entire life preparing to die. so that when they do actually get to the point of death, you're as wide open as
Mm.
possible. Uh, which is and that's the kiss of death, is being this shape and allowing yourself to just leave. That's my goal. That's what and you
Mm.
can't I want to learn as much as possible to help me physiologically, mentally, spiritually, emotionally. It's the whole package when we're moving out. So, and it's
Mm.
exciting. And the more I learn and the more I embody this, and the more potent life becomes and precious, because you realize, wow, I've got hands that do stuff. And it's a miracle. It's kind of like, but like a child, like everything is exciting and awesome. It wakes you up to life when you study and understand the intricacies of what it must mean to finally allow your body to die. And then what? I just find it
Mm.
thrilling.
Well,
And my friends
right.
think you're the only person I know who loves death. And I'm like,
Um,
how could you not? It's got
I'm
to be
I'm
the
I'm with you on it. It fascinates me so much. I always find now that people go to me when somebody died, and I feel so honored, and I'm just like ready to show up, like, and I even friends who I haven't spoke to for years. I got the phone call this week, and I'm like, I'm here with you. Let's do this. Like, I'm with you. Um, I'm wondering if you could. Gosh, I could talk to you forever. I'm looking at the time and I'm like, we've gone through none of the questions, but we kind of did go for all the questions in their own unique, beautiful way. But I'm wondering if you can share some words that would, I'll say, grant people permission to grieve, because I feel like that's another thing, is like the rush, the getting back to how things were, of keeping a mask on to kind of stay in their certain roles. What would you say to anyone listening who is walking with grief, or who may walk with grief in the future, which we all will? Um, what is what would you say to them so they can give themselves permission?
well, when the wave comes, it's when you notice it's coming with, it's just noticing it. Noticing it's the first thing. Um, Noticing it and then just allowing yourself to take a breath and then lean into it. Just lean into it and allow it to have its way with you, because it will come like a wave and it will be excruciating and you'll want to claw your insides out or yearn or wail. And I know that if you allow yourself to do it fully and completely, it moves, and then it moves and it has to go somewhere. It doesn't get stuck. And then it could be 5 minutes, it could be 15 minutes, it could be an hour later. Ah, there's the end of the contraction. Just like birth. It's a wave of intense longing or anger or whatever that feeling is. When just let it come. Don't numb it out. Try to stop it. Contract with it. Because you remember, if a contraction comes and you're like, this hurts, it gets even more painful. Try not to do that. Just witness it moving. And if you can, there is a moment when you can actually love the feeling, because it is actually love. That's why you're feeling so intensely. It's because you love. And that's when it actually becomes sort of delicious. And you have to be careful and notice when you start to want it, then you're enjoying this emotional ride, which is very different to falling into a feeling. And I learned that to be able to tell the difference between a feeling and an emotion. Emotion is more of, you can easily get on a ride of emotion and it circles and you can't get out of it and you feel like that's when you're having an emotional loop about it, the grief, the loss, whatever it is. But if you can drop underneath that, and it's a skill. You have to notice when you're looping, you have to decide to take a breath and go even deeper. which is contrary to what you kind of want to stop feeling this horrible. I'll distract, I'll watch TV, I'll go and eat something, I'll have a drink. But if you can just notice that that's the desire and say, no, thank you, I'm going to go deeper because there's another layer of my humanity that's calling me to drop in. And if we can train people to sit with and bear witness to one, it makes it easier for the person to drop in when they feel held in that sacred container. And unfortunately, witnesses are not taught. We're not taught how to witness and hold space and be present without comforting. So for now, those who are in a tense state of loss on their own, unfortunately, if you don't have a family member or a dear friend who understands what it is to bear witness, then you must have the courage to do it by yourself.
Mm. Wow.
I just tell people, I whisper in people who are all alone in deathbeds all over the country in the nursing homes, I whisper, you've got this.
Mm.
You can do it. You've got it. I'm right here. And you can do that for yourself. It's not easy. I'm not saying this is, it's probably the most difficult thing.
Wow. That
What
thing that
else
you
is
whispered is powerful, like when someone can say like, you've got this and I trust your journey. And it like touches something so deep because I think for many of us, we've always been told to be something different or here, have this remedy, have this, like it will fix it, it will take it away. But literally just bearing witness to this experience. And um I really resonate with what you were saying about like emotions and feelings because I can see with myself after my brother died, I really went into it. And there could also be the feeling of chasing that as well because of the guilt of it not being there. For the moments when I don't feel so sad and I feel happy, a guilt, you should feel sad, shoulds and coulds and all this stuff. Now this past 6 months, I really found this place of when the wave comes, I recognize it now. It's very specific. It's a very like unique sensation inside of my body related to my brother. But it's also one that's very similar to an anxiety feeling. So I've just got very clear on that sensation and got really like specific. Where is it? What does it feel like? Just so I know that when it comes, I know what I'm with. I know that something has come up. And it could be a trigger that I've not even noticed consciously. It could just be something the way I've moved my body and it's opened up a memory. But just sitting, taking time, just sit and feel and feel and feel without using the mind to make any ideas or like even do visuals, just like to feel it. And like in as we become the gentle observer for ourselves, the softening happens. And I think that is, as we do it for ourselves, we can feel how beautifully nourishing that is and how then we can offer that gift to other people in our lives as well. And it is really difficult, like you mentioned, because when I see my mother who's lost her son, it's like, I want to take it away. My whole life has been wanting to make my mum feel no pain, like no suffering, wanting to change things for her. And so this for me has been a journey of I don't have to change this experience for her. I just have to be with her, love her, and listen to her over and over again if she wants to, instead of saying, maybe it's time for therapy. Maybe it's time for this. Because I think there's also, we have to trust ourselves as humans to know when people are going down a dark path that could be damaging for them. And like, I trust myself to see that. And I trust my mother as well to see that. And I said to her, if you're feeling at all in that place that you can't get out of, and it feels like there's a different shade to it. It's different in grief, and she knows this. I was like, let's communicate to one another because we don't want the same thing happening to what happened to my brother, if we get into that point. So it's like and to know that we have to be very conscious of where we're at emotionally, mentally, and learning ways to take care of ourselves, making sure. Like it's so funny. It's the things the same as postpartum. It's the same as any rite of passage I see. The same as with grief. It's like, are we well nourished as much as we can stomach? What does that mean? But like well nourished, rested, having our body move, like moving our body, whether we're getting energy work or moving through dance or stretching, and like the community, the same pillars that would be in postpartum. I see it the same as when we're grieving, and that, as you're mentioning, is like so that we can have the container that is the container for us to soften into, to really get with that place inside of us and dance with that grief.
Well, she's so fortunate to have you as her witness, and with your wisdom, knowing how to steer, how to just help her recognize. Wow, and think of all the people who don't have that and how much more difficult it is for them.
Mm. Do you see that people move towards, I mean, do you recommend that people would call in almost invisible support, like their ancestors or other allies that they might use, like plants or elements as a witness to them? Have you ever explored that? Because there's so many people that don't have anyone. It's
I
like,
know, but then as you know, when you're in that state of grief, you can't think of those things
true.
anyway.
So
The
true.
feelings of you're drowning in the feelings, and that's so.
Oh,
I
yeah.
know. I know for me, when I was I thought I was going to go mad, and I
Mm.
remember saying to many people, "I'm going to go mad. I'm going to go mad," and I really felt that if the the repetitive thoughts and the if that didn't go away, I thought, "I am gonna go mad. You don't understand. I'm really gonna go mad." And
Yeah.
they would look at such love, and they said, "You won't go mad. You wouldn't let yourself go mad." And I wanted to say, "How do you know? It's unbearable." But I heard that, and I could you can tell when you're even in the depths of it. She's right. I think I will be able to pull myself up when I'm getting to that point, just like
Mm.
your is. Just to have somebody say, "No, you won't. You're stronger than you think.
Mm.
Y you can witness yourself. If you can witness yourself right now, you won't let yourself go there."
Mm.
Uh, and to trust. No, they're right. I am strong. I know this terrible thing happened, but damn it, there'll be a time where it won't feel like this, uh, and
Aye.
sure it's yeah.
That is one of the I is one thing I wanted to share as well. Like me and mum celebrate when there's a space. So when there's time to come up for air, we celebrate that so that we remember the next time there's the wave that comes, that we keep coming up for air and we keep having space, and we are able to laugh and we are able to enjoy life and taste delicious food, and that does happen because when you're in it, feels like them parts never existed. It's like that's all there is because it's all consuming. Like you just mentioned, like when you're in it, it's really difficult to see out of it.
I
Mm.
do have a couple of things there because I grief comes up in the workshops that I teach, and one of them is to write to him, and you've
Mm.
already done this, but you write and like you're having a conversation.
Mm.
You know, you start it with "Hi, how you doing?" and then
Yeah.
you just your pen will write how he's doing. He's going to respond to you, and he'll
Mm.
tell you that. And then let it be like this amazing, wow, that is kind of cool. I can actually still have a conversation with him. And you just have to let yourself write, try not to think. Um, that is one I find it's a powerful tool to just have a written conversation with them.
Mm.
And the other is to think of something that perhaps you don't that he wasn't finished. He wasn't complete, right? He was young still. There was things he wanted to do, and take a meditation to complete that for him in your
It's like,
meditation in your mind's eye. go through the process of that with him, whether it was going to law school and graduating and seeing him with the gown and the people around him and then getting a job and literally make it up like you were making the movie of his life that he didn't have.
Mm, it's
I
beautiful.
find that even people are scared to because they go, "Oh, that'll make me miss him even more because he couldn't get to do it." Fact are you are giving him his life in the
Mm,
doing of it, him definitely witnessing you do it and probably participating and guiding you in your own make-believe movie. Uh,
that's really
yeah.
beautiful. I love that. I really love that. I've not heard that before, and it's not come to me, and maybe because there's also a fear of that as well, but that is a really, really beautiful one. I did, a hypnotherapy, and one thing I saw so clearly was I was trying to pull him back to help me through when actually he was asking me my vision was to say, "Am I okay? Where am I going?" And it was like a moment of me helping him transition because all the time before I was like, "You helped me, like, you left, you helped me." And so that was an interesting shift of still seeing on there's still that transition happening and that gentleness and that I can think of things clearly. I can anchor in and say the same things like, "You've got this," like, "I love you, I see you," and it continues.
Well,
Thank you.
that's what the 3-day vigil is about, is sitting when you're sitting present with the dead body and you're imagining this bridge and you're talking to them. That's why the Buddhists read from the Bardo texts. They're actually instructing the one who's just left their physical body. They're telling them where to go because they probably do feel
Wow.
confused and lost. And so if we put our attention on helping them, at least for those first 3 days, we can go gather our grief, after that. But it's a very powerful way to actively do something for the person who died.
Wow.
Um,
Thank
yeah,
you. Thank you so much, Olivia. I would love for you to share, what you are offering right now in the space that you live or what offerings you have online and where people can find you.
sure. Yes. Well, my company is Sacred Crossings, sacredcrossings.com. And it's twofold. It's the Institute for Conscious Dying. I offer classes and workshops in conscious dying. Anybody can take them. You don't have to want to help people die. My level 1 and 2 is the Death Doula program, where you learn how to shepherd another in their dying journey. Level 1 is about looking at your own fears, phobias, beliefs, and ideas about death and dying. And level 2 is the nuts and bolts of what it means to die physically, how to put your things in order, how to help everybody get prepared to die. So the only thing left to do is to die. That's level 2, and then if you want to do the death midwifery program, there's 2 more levels, levels 3 and 4. Level 3 is how to prepare, how to care for your loved one's body after they die, how to keep it at home for a 3-day vigil. You learn everything about the funeral industry and burials, cremations, composting, sea burials. All of that is level 4. So if you do the entire program, then it's a very intensive um, deep dive into everything you wanted to know and probably didn't want to know about the dying journey. Um, that is the institute, and we also have an alternative funeral home here in Los Angeles, where we help families to keep open that window for the 3-day vigil and funeral at home, uh, as well as everything else. But we try to maintain the sacred in every step of the way, from the pickup, from the home to right through to the cremation or the burial. Uh, just honoring this sacred passage because it is perhaps the most sacred ground other than the birthing room that
Wow.
we're ever privileged to witness. So thank
Thank
you.
you, Olivia, for the incredible work that you're doing. And I used to be a nurse and I had been with so many people in their last breaths and then seeing them transition. And I just feel like if this was in my nurse training. Wow, I could have shown up for them in so much more many more ways like than I did because I didn't know. And instead just learning from maybe other people's fears of how they hold that. Like a lot of time I saw a disconnect with the women I was working with and the men I was working with, disconnect or jokes or sarcasm and like just not holding that sacred space. And I feel like, wow, this should totally be in like the nursing curriculum. Like so many all everybody should be doing this really, but yeah, it just resonated with that because I used to do it as a profession. And I was wondering as well, is it recorded or is it live? Can anyone join at any time or
I like to keep them live. It's either a live webinar with me because there's so many questions and it touches people. I think it's important to have that opportunity to share and express. We do a lot of breakout rooms. They're offered online and in person, so you can choose. You can come to Los Angeles to do the in person version, and one coming up in May. Um, a death doula in-person training, and I do have a few spots left for that. You can email me at olivia@sacredcrossings.com. Uh, and
and is that just in person or is that gonna transfer to like can people
no,
tune in?
that's the in-person one. And then
So
I'm doing it again in June on webinar. So you
all
can
right.
choose either.
I'm gonna hopefully be at that one then. I would
Okay.
love to be there. So June, I'll go and check it out. Is it online now? I can go and see it?
Yeah. It's online under courses and training on sacredcrossings.com.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Olivia. I'm really happy that we got to have this conversation.